Excuse my French, ladies and gentlemen, but this is just nearly terrific.
2018 has been a compelling year in MMA. From comeback wins, dramatic knockouts, and high-profile scandals in and out of the cage. But for all the accolades, there have been plenty of matches best left for the archives. And in today's episode, we'll look at some of the worst ones. Welcome to the INC, and these are 5 of the worst fights of 2018. Number 5. Bob Sapp vs. Osunarashi. Once feared for his huge size, Bob Sapp is one of the biggest jokes in modern MMA, amassing a 13-fight losing streak against undersized regional fighters and giant toddlers? At Ryzen 13, Sapp looked to end his losing streak against Egyptian sumo wrestler and MMA newcomer Osunarashi. Sapp was known for his tendency to give up at the first sign of resistance, and things appeared to be no different as Osunarashi swarmed the beast with a flurry of punches at the start of the first. This time, however, Sapp chose to keep fighting, and even ended the second round on top, after reversing an early takedown from his opponent. The joy on Bob's face was evident for all to see. Osunarashi was visibly gassed by the start of the third, allowing a golden chance to finally end his barren spell, although that soon proved harder than expected.
Osunarashi's barely moving. Bob's just gonna throw a puncher to the body.
He's exhausted.
2 minutes, he can barely stand up Osunarashi. Bob Sapp barely has the strength and stamina to finish him.
After 2 minutes of hyperventilating, the fight went to a decision, where after 8 years and 13 first-round losses, it finally happened.
He can barely stand up, but Bob Sapp emerges victorious with a unanimous judge's decision.
Number 4. Heather Hardy vs. Anjulien. Heather Hardy arrived in Bellator with hopes of being the company's Holly Holm, an ambition that needs assessing based off her recent performance. After losing her last fight to Christina Williams, Hardy took on journeyman Anjulien at Bellator 194. Both ladies entered the fight with extensive boxing backgrounds, and hopes were high for a stand-up war to showcase Bellator's flyweight division.
We never want to promise the audience a great fight. However, in fairness, on paper, this is going to be fun.
An anticipated striking battle instead became a clinch fest, Julien pressing early with little damage before Hardy ended the round on top after a sloppy takedown in the first. It was soon clear neither girl was comfortable fighting on the ground, although Hardy did land some nice shots and threaten a series of half-hearted submissions. The fight did improve slightly in the third, but by then the damage was done, in a fight which raised questions about Bellator's booking of prospect fighters. Despite winning a judge's decision, the fight all but ended Hardy's chances as a realistic title contender, while plans for a rematch in the boxing ring fell through after Julien announced her retirement from MMA with a record of 2-4. Number 3. Tito Ortiz vs. Chuck Liddell 3. Back in November, we produced a video looking at MMA's greatest old guy moments. It's safe to say this fight didn't make the list. After 8 years and a truckload of debt, Chuck Liddell was coaxed out of retirement by boxing promoter Oscar De La Hoya, setting a fight with old rival Tito Ortiz in Golden Boy's first MMA pay-per-view. Many fans feared the worst after seeing a labored Liddell struggling in sparring, and those doubters were proven right moments into the fight. Liddell looked like the 48-year-old he was, throwing strikes at a glacial pace and losing his balance after the first meaningful punch he threw. Ortiz, who only retired last year, seemed much more comfortable given the circumstance, and put Liddell and viewers out of their misery 4 minutes into the first round.
Oh, there Ortiz makes a right hand. Liddell's down, and Liddell is out!
It says much when Chuck's wife seemed to have better striking defense than her husband. The fight was widely condemned by many in the industry, many accusing De La Hoya of exploiting Chuck's long-term health in exchange for publicity and pay-per-view buys. Liddell hasn't ruled out returning to the sport in the future, while De La Hoya has set about booking Diaz-McGregor 3 in 2035. Number 2. Mike Jackson vs. CM Punk. The UFC prides itself on showcasing the best of MMA talent, but Mike Jackson's fight with CM Punk at UFC 225 called that boast into question. After moving to the sport in 2014, former pro wrestler Punk had come unstuck at the hands of Mickey Gall, with many seeing his match with Jackson as a final chance to prove himself as a legitimate fighter. A match between the two worst fighters in the promotion was as bad as expected. A mix of sloppy strikes and wild spinning kicks, with Jackson clearly the more comfortable fighter. Although Punk did score a brief highlight by landing a takedown late in the first. By the second, Punk's attacks became desperate and labored, allowing Jackson to take full control and Punk to showcase his trademark sloth guard. Despite being close to finishing the fight, Jackson chose to drag the match to a judge's decision, in one of the rare occasions where both winner and loser were cut by the promotion. Despite his performance, Punk hasn't given up his hopes of being an MMA fighter, working as a commentator for CFFC and teasing another fight, provided he gets the right opponent.
Oh, okay.
And at number 1, Derek Lewis vs. Francis Ngannou. Jackson and Punk was as bad as they come, but at least the two were willing to put on a show. The same can't be said for Derek Lewis vs. Francis Ngannou at UFC 226. Over the past 3 years, Lewis and Ngannou had torn through the UFC heavyweight division, winning 13 of their past 15 fights and boasting some of the hardest knockouts ever seen in the sport. Although experts were divided on the winner, they were united on one thing. There was no way this fight would make it out of the first round.
If you would have told me it would be 3 minutes into the first round and Ngannou never even threw a shot, I would say you're crazy.
Yeah.
Both men refused to engage for the majority of the fight. Lewis at the peak of his back issues, and Francis gun-shy after his loss to Stipe Miocic 6 months earlier. By the start of the third round, the most entertaining thing about the fight was the commentary.
This is going to be the weirdest decision ever. If this goes to decision.
If it goes to a draw, would you be surprised?
Would they both lose?
The fight broke the record for the least number of strikes thrown in a UFC contest, with the Vegas crowd quick to voice their displeasure as the fight finally drew to a close.
That's one of the worst heavyweight fights I've ever seen in my life, if not the worst. No, I'm going to say the worst. What was worse?
And now, time for a few dishonorable mentions. Poliana Viana and JJ Aldrich were given a main card slot at UFC 227 and provided to throw 15 minutes of sloppy strikes and failed takedowns. Sam Alvey was the only man smiling after his match with John Vellante. But then again, when doesn't he? UFC Hamburg. Just the whole thing. This is the INC, and Happy New Year.